Coming up on Tech News Today, it's PDFs gone wild. They're all over the place with their vulnerabilities, so watch out when you're opening up your PDFs. And if there's a link that says it's a PDF, it's probably not a PDF, so don't click on it or you're going to shut down your entire corporation's email. We'll tell you all about that, as well as when it's appropriate to tweet while in an ambulance. All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Thursday, September 9th, 2010. Tech News Today is brought to you by TWiT's special coverage of DragonCon. Want to see dragons? Watch the TWiT specials. They're really dragons. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Becky Worley.
And I'm Dr. Kiki.
Behind the boards, our excellent producer, Erik Lanigan.
Hey, guys, how are you?
Doing good.
Fantastic.
This is the show where we kick around the tech news of the day along with you, try to make some sense of it all. And something we certainly didn't expect to happen. Apple has changed their mind on a few of their restrictions for developing apps for the App Store, as well as giving you actual rules.
And the thing we didn't expect was Apple ever changing their mind.
Yeah, Apple changing their mind. Doesn't happen a whole lot. And then the rules, the guidelines for the App Store have been just sort of like, you know, whatever they happened to want them to be at the time, it seemed like. But they've actually published a document.
And
Let's start with the geeky stuff for the developers, too. I mean, that's big, the ability to use Flash, right? That's the headline here, Tom?
Yeah, Section 331, if you remember it well from earlier discussions a few months ago, was the part that said you could not use any compiled code from a third-party device. And this was thought to be directed pretty much at Adobe because they had rolled out a new tool in their Adobe CS suite. The S stands for suites. You can't really say that. It's like saying ATM machine. But in Adobe CS, that allowed you to write in Flash and then recompile it for the App Store. Well, that became against the rules. They've eliminated Section 331 entirely. So you can now use that tool again to make apps for the App Store, and they shouldn't be rejected. There's also a tweak to Section 332 about interpreters. This one is more for gaming coders wanting to use the Lua interpreter. This really just kind of tweaked the language to be shorter so that it doesn't actually prevent you from using the Lua interpreter to run scripts, but they do have to be hard-coded into the app bundle itself. You can't call them from the internet. And then Section 339 on privacy and analytics, when it was first implemented, a lot of people thought it was targeted directly at Google's AdMob mobile ad services. Now it's been tweaked again to be a lot shorter. Doesn't really change the substance of it about what you can collect on people, but it doesn't seem to be targeting Google anymore. So it allows for a more analytics and collecting of data by apps, still within the strictures of Apple's privacy guidelines.
And the big reason why this is important for developers is they can now write, hopefully, in one program, and then that can actually be compiled to run on both Android and on iOS devices. Apple's stipulation there is just so long as it doesn't call out any other platforms in the code and in the program, it should be fine. And this is going to make life a lot easier for developers. Now, the question is, why did Apple do it? Did they do it so that they could compete with the Android marketplace and make it easier for developers who are writing for both? Or did they do it because they were feeling the FTC pressure, who had received complaints from Adobe about non-competitive or anti-competitive behavior from Apple?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say, but my guess is Android is the big problem here. The fact that the Android marketplace is getting more popular, they're seeing more and more developers complain and either threaten or actually start to move to developing for Android, that they wanted to ease things up. I don't think it's backing off like, we'll throw you a bone, we'll change something here and there. I think it's saying, okay, we need to develop a relationship with our developers and keep them happy. So let's modify a few things here. I bet there's a big internal debate within Apple and somebody just won it who had lost a few months ago. You know, somebody's back on the ascendancy now who's like, I told you not to put those things in here, and now we have to eat crow by taking them out.
Well, I think the Android market share numbers that have been coming out have definitely put the pressure on Apple in ways they weren't expecting. And it's important to note that as we talk about Flash as something that you can use as you create programs and apps, it doesn't mean that Flash is going to run natively in the browser on any iOS devices, right?
Right.
No, yeah, that's right. I mean, Opera being the exception there, where we wonder, hey, how did they squeeze in there? They pretend not to be a browser because they're actually delivering all the web pages directly from Opera servers because they compress them. That seems to have worked somehow, so you can run Opera, but every other browser has to be WebKit.
I think the thing that got the most attention that was maybe in the mainstream press was the information about the new rules and the guidelines for apps and their approval process. In reading the actual document, it was classic. It had such a voice to it. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a very corporate document. And it really, I think, will help developers as they try and figure out, okay, what will get approved. And I'm just going to read some of these things verbatim because they're just really interesting. We view apps differently than books or songs, which we do not curate. If you want to criticize a religion, write a book. If you want to describe sex, write a book or a song, or create a medical app. It can get complicated, but we've decided not to allow certain kinds of content in the App Store. Specifically, they call out, we've got enough fart apps.
It says we have over 250,000 apps in the App Store, and, quote, we don't need any more fart apps.
And they were actually using that to say that apps have to have good entertainment value. They also say we have lots of kids downloading apps, and they say parental controls don't work, so we're keeping an eye out for the kids.
And I think that's probably a very important part of all of these rules. In as you read through the highlights here, it just seems to all come back to, you know, what is good for the kids.
Think of the children.
If parents aren't turning off the parental controls, how can we kind of mold the store so things aren't going to be
Let's
too
change
outlandish?
our entire society to be only acceptable to children.
Yeah, why not? No.
Well, they are distinguishing themselves from the open Android marketplace, and that's a marketing decision as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, a safe place.
If it sounds like we're control freaks, it writes, well, maybe it's because we're so committed to our users and making sure they have a quality experience with our products.
Yeah, and I think they just basically said, you know, and this line also describes it, we will reject apps for any content or behavior that we believe is over the line. What's that line, you ask? Well, as a Supreme Court justice once said, I'll know it when I see it. And so they're basically saying, we're giving you the best we can give you in terms of guidelines, but we also hold the final judgment here, and we will use our discretion.
And there's a little bit of arrogance in here. If your app is rejected, we have a review board you can appeal to. If you run to the press and trash us, it never helps. Also, we have lots of serious developers who don't want their quality apps to be surrounded by amateur hour.
Yeah, and this gets to another point. That's a very Steve Jobs statement, by the way.
It's right out of the keynote.
Yeah, another statement is professional political satirists and humorists are exempt from the ban on offensive or mean-spirited commentary. And so this article here asks, what about amateur satirists and humorists? What about, you know, where is that line? Well, it's that kind of just subjective drawing of a line. Well, you're professional and you're an amateur.
I've got a clear idea why they changed the paragraphs that are aimed at developers. I don't have a clear idea why they put out these guidelines. It doesn't really seem to help much. I guess everybody complained, there aren't any guidelines. We don't know what the guidelines are. But then they write this, which basically says, well, we do this because you're an amateur, and we do this, we could change our minds, and we do this to protect the children sometimes. But this is a living document, so we can change it anytime we want. And essentially, we know it when we see it, so you're at our mercy. All of these discussions we've had before, there's really nothing new here to discuss. It's Apple's store. They can do what they want with it. The solution to me would be to allow you to sideload apps. So if you get an app that's not from the App Store, that you could still put it on and run it. And that would allow the people who know how to make that happen to run whatever apps they want, but it would still shield Apple and have them able to create that safe space that they want to create. This doesn't, to me, do anything to advance the conversation.
Totally obscure sidebar. One of my favorite things that was written in here that was actually very specific. I'd never even thought of this before. They're not going to approve apps that use location-based APIs for automatic or autonomous control of vehicles, aircraft, or other devices.
Well,
you can't drive your car,
Becky,
with your iPhone.
That's a direct reference to Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, where Dr. Horrible uses an iPhone-like device to try to take down the hammer.
And it goes horribly awry.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out that very specific part of information that was conveyed for all of you who are working on those, remote driving apps for your, Ford Fiesta.
So y'all think Steve Jobs wrote this introduction, this guidelines introduction?
I don't think he did.
I'm willing to bet you.
You think he did? I don't know. He may have had a hand in it, but at the same time, things like this, there's a group of people who work on the app store, and they've probably had to come to make decisions as to what is allowed and what's not allowed. And so, I mean, maybe Steve Jobs had a sign off on this, and maybe he had a hand in some of these restrictions. But at the same time, there's going to be just a group of people who are working on this collaboratively and have maybe come to this over, several months, a year of, actually going through the hundreds of thousands of app applications that they get.
I think it was written by Bad Horse.
Bad Horse.
Amazon is taking the Kindle out into the real world. It's probably really nervous. Amazon has announced that they are going to join forces with Best Buy to put Kindle e-readers on the store's shelves this holiday season, right up there next to the Nook and the Sony Reader.
Great.
I think
More
this
options.
is great news for consumers, don't you, Kiki? I mean, don't you want to get your hands on something and compare, okay, I'm going to look at the Nook, I'm going to look at the Sony Reader, I'm going to look at the Kindle. I mean, that's great for the person who wants the tactile experience and uses that to make their decision.
Yeah, and there are probably a lot of people who, when they go out shopping, like you said, the tactile decision is the one that makes it. You go hold it in your hand, you look at what the screen looks like, you maybe read something on it, and you pick up the one next to it, compare and contrast right next to the items in the store. I think it's a great decision to go into the brick and mortar.
It's really a different decision for Amazon, though, because they are the store, right? They're the place where you buy everything. So for them to take something that they sell and put it in another store is hard. And it's something that
hurt them a little.
Something people may not realize. The Kindle team is divided in two. It was divided a while back by Jeff Bezos. There is the Kindle store team whose main job is to make the Kindle store available everywhere they can. And that's why you see it coming to phones and tablets all over the place. When you think, well, wouldn't they want to try to force people to buy Kindles? Bezos is smart enough to say, no, your job, team, make us sell a lot of ebooks as many places as you possibly can. So make PC versions and Mac versions and iPhone versions and Android versions. And then the hardware team is separate. So the hardware team is finally kind of stepping up their thing like, fine, you're going to go to all these platforms. We're going to try to put the hardware out into other places. And I think that's smart too, which is, you know what? Yeah, people can still order it on Amazon, but it doesn't hurt to have it in a major electronics retailer.
It's not
and in the chat room, they mentioned that the Kindle has been in Target stores for a while. So, I mean, this is part of their overall strategy. And I think the big innovation here is that they're doing this in retail stores as the prices have come down. So remember that the Wi-Fi only Kindle is $139. So when you're looking at it right next to the Sony Reader, which is $10 more, and the Nook, which is $10 more at $149, it makes the Kindle even more compelling. So I think that side-by-side in this instance is a good go-to-market strategy for Amazon.
And in the end, it does help sell more ebooks because through the Kindle, you buy books through the Amazon bookstore, and you're getting all Amazon DRM content.
And don't forget that Amazon and Target are partners.
Right.
You buy Target stuff through Amazon.com. So taking the Kindle to Target was a much safer move than taking it to Best Buy, which is essentially a competitor.
Yeah.
On to the ZeroDay attack. Becky brought this up to me yesterday. She's like, yeah, there's this Adobe PDF ZeroDay attack. Should we talk about it? I'm like, Adobe, PDF. I mean, come on. If we reported on every one of these, we'd never talk about anything else. But, of course, this one has gone wild. Hackers are actively exploiting the vulnerability. It's It's PDFs gone wild. We can't tell you any more about this story until after 11 o'clock. And
it's spring break for PDFs, viruses, and the Kindle. They're all gone wild.
An Adobe spokeswoman described the attacks as limited, but did warn that that could change with the availability of samples and that they don't have a workaround for it. They're actively working on a fix for it, but they don't have any way to protect you from it right now. So all I'd say is if you're out there using PDFs, I would try Foxit Reader.
Foxit Reader.
Foxit Reader on your Windows machine. It's an excellent free alternative to the Adobe PDF Reader, and I switched to it a long time ago so that I just didn't have to think about this sort of thing.
And does it not have the same vulnerabilities, or is it just not as attacked?
It's not like it has never had a vulnerability, but it is usually immune to these things that go right after Acrobat.
You can also use Google Docs, right?
Well, yeah,
to view.
You could view it out of Gmail in a Google Doc, and you can use the preview app on OS X. There's a few other ways around it, yeah.
Yeah. And just don't take PDFs from sketchy PDF vendors.
Don't take PDFs from strangers, kids.
That's right.
This actually is a good time to just redo. Don't open attachments.
Which is a little bit of a message that perhaps my coworkers at ABC could
I've been screaming this for years, since I first heard Mr. Leo Laporte yell it on the screensavers back in 1998. Don't open attachments. Yes, sometimes you need to open attachment, but if you start with that rule and you make the attachment really prove why it's worthy of you opening it, you'll keep yourself out of a lot of trouble.
Yep.
Also, another thing is don't click on links when you're not sure where they come from or where they're taking you to. And that's the thing that Becky's coworkers over at ABC should have been aware of, as well as people at NASA, lest ABC feel picked on, Comcast, AIG, Disney, the Florida Department of Transportation, and Wells Fargo, just a few of the organizations who've had their email slowed to a crawl because of a new worm that has just gotten really virulent.
Very fast. It's called
the
Here You Have virus. And Kiki, you were likening it to a real
flu virus or
biological virus.
Yeah, well, the idea that we have antivirus that probably most people at ABC or Comcast or NASA are going to have on their computers that are probably set up to block any attacks from known viruses. But the minute that there's just a slight change, enough of a change, a variant on the form, the antivirus software doesn't recognize it. Same thing happens in your immune system.
The official designation is W32/VBMania@MM. If you're looking for the definition on McAfee Labs, that's what they've called it. There's a couple of different variants they've identified. One says, here you have, or possibly just for you in the subject. And then there's a link to a PDF. But when you click on it, it actually doesn't take you to a PDF. It takes you to an SCR, an executable that will download, will ask to download. And if you let it download, it infects you. And all it says in the text is, this is the document I told you about. You can find it here. So,
but then doesn't it go to sexy download movie?
Well, there's a second variant. So I was going to run through this scenario, which is, you're expecting a document from Becky. You see this. You say, oh, this is from Becky. This is the document I told you about. You can find it here. And I click on it and open it. You have to be a little more skeptical when there's not a thread, when it's really generic like that. This is how they trick you. And you have to go, wait a minute. Why isn't Becky saying, like, what the document is? Why isn't the rest of the thread that we talked about this in here? Look for that stuff. And then the other variant is this is the free download sex movies. You can find it here.
Which you would totally expect from me.
Totally.
Well, I would expect better grammar from you than this is the free download sex movies. You can find it here.
This is the free download sex movie.
That one is and then it says, enjoy your time.
Oh, Lord.
So those are a little easier. Like,
Hope
look,
it was worth it, whoever
if
opened that.
If it doesn't have any grammatical sense and no spaces after the commas and it involves free download sex movie, it's a pretty good chance you're dealing with a virus.
Oh, I will not send out any of those today.
Make your time. All of your virus belong to us.
So true.
All right.
Make sexy time?
In slightly related to sexy time news, Craigslist is being called in front of Congress now, even though they've removed the adult services section. They even removed the snarky censored box where the adult services section used to be. They are now being dragged in front of Congress to explain what happened, why they had it in the first place, and what they're doing to continue to fight against trafficking.
I think this is just singling Craigslist out. I mean, they have had a very active adult section, and yes, there have been definitely have been things found there, but Craigslist is not the only website where stuff like this occurs. There are lots of other websites around the world, and I think they're just being singled out. And this is just it's a political play. It's a dog and pony show. There's a politician who's just like, oh look, we're gonna bring Craigslist out here and smack them around a little bit, and then everything, and I'll look better, and everyone's gonna be happy.
I agree with your sense that this is, from the timing perspective, very political and it's very showy. But I also have to disagree with the part that Craigslist is just like any other site out there. Craigslist is a huge disruptor in the way that we share information, trade, and barter. And I think that they have made their claim on the internet. And while I want them to be open and free in many ways, we're not talking about stolen goods being trafficked, or, this is not some guy who's doing the internet version of selling watches from a coat that he's stolen. When it comes down to this issue of sex trafficking, and really the people who are behind this are very conservative groups. In many ways, they are saying, hey, we're talking about the extremes where it's child sex trafficking and people who are being trafficked whose rights need to be, have people standing up for them. I think that Craigslist has a responsibility to either manage it or get out of this business.
Well, and that is exactly what they've done, and they've been only punished for it. I mean, that's my problem here is as people have asked them to crack down on this, they have. They never charged for these ads in the first place. This is something that really gets confused out there a lot. Oh, they're making lots of money off this. The only reason they're making any money off of it is that when the first accusations that they were profiting from this came into place, they said, look, well, if you want us to be able to verify who these people are, we'll start charging. They weren't charging before that.
Because then they could put it through a credit card verification system.
Then they put in management, community management, where you had to talk on the phone to somebody before you could place the ad. They were cooperating very well and trying to figure out how can we make it easier for law enforcement to catch the bad guys who do this without getting rid of the opportunity for people who want to take advantage of this section legally and shut them down. And so what has happened now is you've gotten rid of an adult services section that could be used by people for absolutely legal opportunities that maybe other people don't like, but it could be used that way. And it's gotten rid of all that and forced all of the illegal behavior off into the corners of Craigslist where it's harder to monitor, and off into the back pages of newspapers where it's been for decades and nobody's done anything about that.
Nobody's ever, and that's what I want. That's what I would love to bring out. Is this is all the weekly papers. SF Guardian, or even Sacramento, or any area, you have a weekly paper where there are sex ads through the back, and I'm sure there's a lot of sex trafficking happening through those ads as well that just has not been tracked down. And this is just singling Craigslist out and making a point of, oh, the internet, and Craigslist is turning over the internet, and blah 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 blah, and we need to put a hand down. But that singling out Craigslist may not end up just singling out Craigslist if there are actual laws changed, like Section 230 of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. If anything is actually changed in that as a result of these hearings, these proceedings, that could have reverberations across the net. If
you're interested in helping women and stopping the sex trafficking, you don't shut this section down. That is not the best way to help these people. It is the best way to harm them. It is the best way to force these issues off into the sideline. It's the best way to help politicians look good in an election year. That's my opinion on it.
I think that you make a good point that if you make it, one of the ubiquitous spots to do this, shut down completely, then you lose some of the oversight that you might have. But I think that the ease of use on this site to begin with, and I give you full due that perhaps the ways that Craigslist was working to make this more, have more oversight on it, that they were not given enough time to see if that actually bore fruit and was something that was successful for law enforcement and kept all the creepy stuff off. But I'm still standing in the middle of this, that I just don't like how easy it was. But I want to make a turn here and show you one thing that I thought was really interesting. It's sort of inside baseball. The person who was called to give testimony to Congress is Craig Newmark, not the CEO, Jim Buckmaster. And the Cato Institute, I have a policy analyst named Jim Harper, and he says he doesn't think that's the right choice, that it shouldn't be Craig that's actually testifying. He says Craigslist has a CEO, referring to Jim Buckmaster. Inviting Craig Newmark puts spectacle ahead of substance. It's like inviting Tony the Tiger to a hearing on childhood nutrition.
And we should point out that Representative Bobby Scott, who is running the subcommittee, has told CNET's Declan McCullough that they have not heard back from Craig Newmark about whether he will appear on Wednesday for the subcommittee. So he may decline to appear, which would force them to either have to subpoena him or pass on this opportunity. So it's a perch to look out over people who are doing bad things. Lots of law enforcement was cooperating with Craigslist and gathering useful information, and now it's gone. So,
yeah,
that's what they wanted. They got it. iOS 4.1 has been jailbroken just hours after iOS 4.1 was released yesterday. The iPhone dev team announced that they had figured out how to exploit the boot ROM of iOS devices. They haven't released this to the public yet to do, but they said they just need to fine-tune it and they'll be ready. That's normal. They usually make the crack and then they have to kind of dress it up and make it easy to use. Work out some of the bugs like any kind of software. But what's interesting about this, because it's an exploit in the boot ROM, it can be applied to any iOS device. It can be applied to the iPad. It can be applied to the iPod Touch, and it will be much harder for Apple to fix than it was to fix the software exploit that they were using for the Jailbreak Me site that was used in the last jailbreak.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fast.
Yeah, it was.
Crazy fast.
Hackers are super fast these days.
Well, it's funny how sometimes these things take a long time. Sometimes they're a little harder, but this one, this is why I don't think Apple writes their operating system specifically to make jailbreaking harder or easier, because it's so variable how hard or easy it is to break.
It's not something like they have a ton of QC on this in-house so that it's not an immediate jailbreak once it's released.
That points to me that they're not, that it's just random, that they're just making their operating system, and sometimes it happens to be harder to jailbreak and other times it's not.
I wonder.
Or maybe stochastic. I'm not sure. It could be some sort of hidden pattern behind there. Microsoft won some backing in a civil procedure to obliterate the Walladack spam botnet. They've almost shut it down entirely. A magistrate judge in the U.S. District Court of Eastern Virginia decided on September 3rd to recommend that a default judgment be granted in Microsoft's favor. The defendants in the case were given 14 days to object. If they do not, the judgment will be final. The operators of this spam botnet have not come forward in this case yet. So we can expect that this judgment will probably stand.
Yeah, Microsoft put up a ton of notices, a lot of postings, and they said they have proof that they were probed by people that they say are related to this Walladack botnet. And this is an interesting part of the cat and mouse game against spammers, because what this ostensibly does is gives Microsoft the right to take over all of the domains and stop all the traffic that's running the botnet. And they call this Operation B49. And it's not just Microsoft, but Microsoft does lead the legal initiative.
It leads
and
the league.
Leads the league. And the premise here is that you basically get an ex parte judgment because the bad guys don't want to show up, and therefore they don't defend themselves, and then Microsoft gets what it wants.
Yeah, and they've been able to really reduce the effectiveness of this particular botnet by deregistering the URLs before they could actually change the botnet to adapt to new URLs, but they haven't actually taken ownership of those domain names yet. So that's the final step in putting the nail in the coffin for this botnet, is to say you'll never get these domain names back. Microsoft now owns them and can make their own botnet.
Ooh.
No, assuming that they
hopefully what they'll be able to do, having access to all of this, is be able to, I guess, backtrack and find out who is infected. So be able to do some actual forensics to find out who might have infected devices and be able to contact them and say, hey, you're infected. Maybe you want to do something about that.
Yeah.
Which to me sounds like a total virus come on. If I got that email, I'd be like, yeah, Microsoft and CERT are contacting me so that I can fix my computer. Sure.
Well, what they do is they give you a URL that you don't have to click on. It's like, go to this website, put in this, username and password so that you can go verify that website's real. You can look at the little lock sign, get the VeriSign Trustee certificate.
No way.
All that
No
stuff.
way.
There are ways.
No way.
So you're just
Granny.
not going to trust
happen?
any email ever.
No way Joe Sixpack's doing this. At this point, he's like, oh, I heard about this on the news. They told me not to click on any of these emails.
Well,
I got them now.
And I have to say, Becky, some Joe Sixpacks don't talk like that, and they're very smart. But
I've just decided not to use my grandmother as the quintessential person we talk about.
Right. If the person you're referring to feels that way, then they probably shouldn't ever click on anything. I'd rather leave it right there.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about the wireless call quality because, gosh, we haven't had enough studies about this. But J.D. Power and Associates, which actually is known for doing very good customer service quality assessment, has measured the call quality of all the major, and not just the 4 major, but like the U.S. Cellulars of the world, too, here in the United States, and come out with a report, not just based on dropped calls, but also interference, failed call connection, voice distortion, echoes, and that annoying thing when your voicemail notification doesn't show up till the next day or your text message doesn't arrive on time.
I hate that.
I hate it.
All of that was considered, put together, and the result, AT&T lags in most regions of the United States. Verizon and Sprint are near the top, and T-Mobile connectivity was totally hit or miss. It really just depended on where you lived.
That was so journalistic in the way you said that, Tom. Basically, let me summarize. AT&T sucks in this. They got hammered.
They did.
So in the Northeast, they came in 3rd.
Hey, in the North Central region, they came in 3rd.
Yeah, then they came in last every place else.
Or second to last. Last or second to last everywhere else, yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah, except for the 2 you mentioned, they came in last everywhere else.
Yes.
Verizon clearly on top. Their Rule the Air campaign supported.
Unless you're in the North Central region, so Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, the Midwest, basically, AT&T is good to go there.
T-Mobile's really good in the Southeast.
Yeah.
It's right up there with Sprint, Nextel, and Verizon, tied for first.
You know what? T-Mobile's cheap, so my expectations of their call quality are not as high as they should be for Verizon, given that their costs for subscription are higher. I mean, in some senses, this falls in line, but
and potentially making an anecdotal argument for regionalism. U.S. Cellular, which is not a national carrier, #1 in the North Central region.
Yep.
With only 8 problems per 100.
Yeah, and the analyst brings up in light of this study. Is connecting it to iPhone sales as well. And so I actually agree with him here is that if AT&T doesn't do something about their national coverage, their iPhone sales may continue to be in trouble. And if iPhone goes non-exclusive and gets onto Verizon, it could cause even more problems for the network.
All right. It is time now, ladies and gentlemen, for the News Fuse. The 18-month-old BlackBerry world has passed 10,000 apps. Congratulations. The Register reports a mere 17 fart-related applications in BlackBerry world, less than 0.02% of the total. That compares very favorable to Apple's fart ratio of 0.31% and Android's 0.11.
I wonder how many apps you actually have to have before that ratio goes up, if there's a threshold.
Yeah. We'll do some more math.
Fart apps, Tom. We've got enough.
Apparently 0.31 is enough of a percentage.
ARM has just revealed the Eagle Cortex A15 MP core with reportedly 5 times the power of existing CPUs while consuming the same amount of energy. Single and dual core cell phone processors will run up to 1.5 gigahertz and quad cores as high as 2.5 gigahertz with the ability to address up to a terabyte of physical memory. The 33 nanometer and 28 nanometer parts based on the license are expected to ship in 2013.
These are smoking. They can do baked-in virtualization, too.
The anti-piracy forces are going rogue.
Warning.
Girish Kumar, managing director of Aplex Software, says his company has been hired by more than 30 Bollywood companies and some from Hollywood to attack online pirates. If a website does not respond to a takedown notice, Aplex launches a denial of service DOS attack on the offending computer server.
Oh, that doesn't seem like escalation now, does it? No. According to Engadget, RIM wants to create digital billboards that automatically add details the slower the traffic gets. In one example, a Roadhouse restaurant would display only the name and exit number of a restaurant in giant letters, but when the traffic slows down, they might show the pecan pie a little more thoroughly. And when it gets really stop and go, they could even add in coupons with a QR code you could scan while you're just sitting there. Yeah.
Fender bender.
It's like, yeah, exactly. You think rubbernecking at an accident is bad? Look at the pecan pie.
The open source VLC media player, the one that you can play, that will play virtually any file you throw at it or load into it, is coming to the iTunes store. Applidium tweaked the client to run on iOS, and now we wait to see if this passes Apple's duplicate feature muster after the big list of requirements today.
We know the guidelines. Will it pass? No.
No. Broadcom, the company that makes the vast majority of wireless chips, has announced its open sourcing its drivers for the latest generation of 802.11n chipsets. The open driver supports multiple current chips and provides a framework for supporting additional chips in the future. Linux wireless woes will be drastically reduced by this move. Tux hugs you, Broadcom.
Thank you, Broadcom.
Thank you.
And finally, in a meeting with top trade officials from the U.S. government, Google called net censorship a trade barrier. Looking at you, China. The search giant's top lawyer says China's censorship amounts to a trade block and threatens existing trade agreements. This is the latest salvo in the Google-China confrontation, with Google threatening to bring in the World Trade Organization as its big stick if the skirmishes continue. And China says, don't do it, Google. Just back off.
Google's got a big stick, Tom.
Forget it, Google. It's Chinatown. I mean, it's China. I mean, the whole thing's China. It's not just a town.
Stop
really
digging.
Big town if it's a town.
Tons of stuff to get to in the calendar today, guys. So let me start with a big rumor. Windows Phone 7 launching 11 October. That's right, October 11th. That's the rumor. This according to mobile phone blog PocketLint.com.
Sounds
now, Microsoft, when asked, says they have no comment. They do not comment on rumors. So 20 days before Halloween, Windows Phone 7. And remember, we're talking about HTC phones, Sony, Dell, a bunch of pretty interesting phones coming out. Google TV, just confusing as to when this will come out. So you remember...
It's not. Paul Otellini just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay, so Intel CEO Paul Otellini, talking to the Wall Street Journal, says, oh, yeah, Google TV is coming this month. But Eric Schmidt at IFA the other day said it's coming this fall.
So it's pretty obvious to me that Otellini's like personal assistant didn't get the memo and forgot to update the speech to say October. Because everything he says in the speech is just like how much we love Google TV and we're in love being involved with Google TV. And when it comes out in September, by golly, we're going to be really excited. And it's like, you know what? Strike, put in October. Speech doesn't change. He just forgot to update it because Google had originally said September. And it wasn't until this recent IFA speech that they made it October. Or maybe Google forgot to tell Intel. Oh, right.
That's all. They're very busy, Tom. Memo. They're really busy.
Yeah.
Dell laying down the law. No more Windows XP shipments after October 22nd. Now, Microsoft has basically put out an edict saying, yeah, October 22nd, last day for XP shipments. But they're known to wiggle on that. But Dell says, yeah, okay, we're sticking with the 22nd. And then they do also remind people that they will have driver support for XP until December of 2012.
We should have a big,
2012.
like a goodbye party for Windows XP on October 22nd. Windows XP has done a lot for us.
We like, it's no Windows Me, let's put it that way.
It won't be goodbye for me as I still use XP.
That's damning with faint praise, Becky.
T-Mobile, the G2 is coming out from hiding. Pre-orders are beginning later this month, and the rumored price, $199. I checked it out on Engadget. This phone looks sweet, no?
Yeah, well, this is T-Mobile trying to get back into that Android hotness that HTC has been stealing away of late, and this is going to be good. The pre-orders begin later this month. They haven't given a shipping date yet.
Google Earth 5.0 just out, and I went and checked it out, and it has a couple things that are new. So it has what they call a historical slider, and basically as you fly over places, you can stop, and then there's this little time slider on the top bar, and it lets you scroll in and out of previous images. So the examples they gave are like a stadium being built. You could see it when it was just a raw patch of grass.
Cool.
Pangea?
Yeah, you can see different seasons.
I know, Pangea.
Can you go all the way back to Pangea?
Split apart.
Not quite back that far, Tom,
right.
but that's nice that you think that. It does also have some underwater features, though. You can go underwater, and then it also puts some clips from like Jacques Cousteau and stuff in there, so that's pretty cool. And you can record your trips when you're going, so you can play it back later. Now, I've got some deals, okay? So we were just talking about phones. We talked yesterday about the Samsung Fastnite from Verizon was going to have a buy one, get one, so that you basically paid $150 for it. But Amazon Wireless, they're selling phones now. They have it for $99, the Samsung Fastnite on Verizon, and the BlackBerry Torch that is $199 on AT&T. They're selling it on Amazon Wireless for $99. That's a dang good deal. Now, one more deal.
Not good news for BlackBerry, though.
Yeah, it's pretty quick to be discounting that thing $100. The most interesting one I found is a 10% off coupon from Best Buy. It's a printable coupon. You take it into the store. It's good till the end of September. And I'll try and get the link into our show notes, but the best way to find it is go to Twitter and find me. I'm B. Worley. And I have a link to it on my Twitter feed just from this morning, and I'll repost it. And while you're there, come on, follow us, sister, huh? Yeah. Tom, you follow me, right?
You're Becky Worley, B. Worley, right? Yeah. I follow you all the time.
Don't make me check my followers.
I'm following you right now.
Big stick.
No, I follow you. Wow, long calendar today. We got one more birthday wish though before we finish it up.
Okay, your turn.
Sony PlayStation turns 15 today, and Sony even has a little like special slideshow of pictures, little trip down memory lane. If you want to help celebrate, you go to PlayStation.com/go/15th anniversary, and they'll try to push the PlayStation Move on you, but then they also have some images of the old PlayStation 1, which everyone thought Sony was crazy to take on Nintendo and Sega at the time. But look who's crazy now, Nintendo, with your Wii that outsells everyone. Maybe they were crazy. No, the PlayStation 2 was the most successful game console of all time, so they weren't crazy at all. And a lot of people forget about the old PlayStation 1.
But it gets to have a quinceañera, so that's pretty awesome.
It's a debutante ball for the PlayStation 1.
That's right.
Yay.
Hey, it's time for some email. We've done all this calendaring. I'm just excited to hear what people have to say. Ryan wrote in to say, hey, guys, just listening to yesterday's show, and you had a guy call in saying Google TV should be voice-controlled. What happens when you're at the climax of some really awesome action scene and someone on the TV yells, stop? I don't want my movies turning themselves off.
The only reason we included this email is because we got so many of them. We get it. It's funny. They won't make it implement like that.
It would not work like that. Why would they build something like that? Who would build it like that?
Funny to
a
think
tech
about.
company building something that they thought was a good idea that was totally fraught with a bad premise from the beginning? No, that would never
not a bad
happen.
premise.
Sure, that could happen.
It's just
but the first time they test it out, which they would do at least that much, and the movie played, and it's not going to do that.
testing.
Yeah, they never do any testing.
No testing.
I am going to read an email from, who is this from?
Jay
Adams.
I think it's John Adams of Virginia.
It's a very old email. Hello, TNT. I had to respond to the story of the reporter who tweeted about his heart attack. As a paid firefighter and EMS provider, I can tell you many care providers question the seriousness of a patient's complaint if their main concern is using a mobile device. I'm assuming the reporter called 911 and the emergency crew responded using their lights and sirens to get to him as quickly as possible. If his first thought was to tweet the heart attack, maybe he should have texted a buddy to get him to the hospital instead. And playing devil's advocate, What would the reporter think if the provider stopped to tweet instead of trading him for his heart attack?
Well, now, okay, I totally get what you're saying, Jay Adams. But, you know, it's the job of the care provider to provide care. It's not the job of the heart attack person not to be on the phone. The heart attack person can do what he wants. But I think he makes a really good point, which is if it wasn't so severe that, you know, that he was able, he was pretty conscious and able to Twitter, it might have been more efficient to drive him in the car. However, I think we do run the risk here of giving bad advice, which is when in doubt, call the ambulance. You know,
and then just I think
make sure you can get the hospital, get care, or get to the hospital first.
Yeah,
and then emergency responders, you just need to have a button or a sign that says, when receiving life-saving care, please put down your cell phone.
Yes,
just
exactly.
like they do, like at store.
Like at restaurants and stuff. Exactly. Just a little sign, you know. While we're saving your life, if you could not be annoying, we would appreciate that.
Is that so much to ask?
I think that's what Jay Adams is asking for here, and I'm behind him with that.
Me too.
All right. We got another really good email from Dustin, the Army spouse in Sparta, Wisconsin, regarding our discussion on Friday about the fact that GameStop is not selling the Medal of Honor series on military bases. And we had mentioned, well, I guess you can go off military base and buy it. But Dustin says, I am a sergeant in the U.S. Army, and I find this absolutely ridiculous. For one thing, if you're overseas where there are PX GameStop stores set up in the larger bases, you don't have the option to go off base and find it. There's no other way to go, so you're stuck with it. He says, playing video games is a great solace after a long day in the field or even after a convoy. I have personally seen combat and have no problem with combat-related games. If I were still in Iraq and AAFES was my only source for video games, I can tell you now I'd be up in arms about it. I think it is ridiculous that they think we are mature enough to die and patrol real streets, but not mature enough to decide if we're offended by a video game. So well spoken, Dustin. Appreciate the soldier's perspective on that, and we thank you for your service. All right, that's it. We've got a lot of news packed in today.
Good.
Yeah, we did.
Don't open attachments, especially for the download sex video movie. And
especially if they're from me.
And there's a lot of stuff going on in the calendar. Those are the two things I learned. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Twit.tv/TNT is where you can find out all about us. You can email us, TNT@twit.tv, and give us a call. Leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yeah.